Okay, what's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday night. Just wanted to pop on here while I'm on here. If you guys are tuning in live, you guys can pop in and ask me any questions, or even if you're not live and you just want to comment on us on what's up, Jai? If you want to comment and ask any questions, I'll go ahead and answer them. But I wanted to come on here and talk about a story. There's some questions that we get all the time about homeschool and our setup, and I wanted to share a couple stories. So one of the questions that we get all the time is, how do you situate your classes the way that you do and still teach to like a group of students in different grades? So for example, our classes that we teach, it goes K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and high school. Like generally speaking, for the most part, this is how we situate our classes. And we get the question, well, how do you teach to like 3 different grades at the same time? And so my answer is always like, if you look at any traditional classroom, whether it be public, private, charter school, and these students sometimes, or these classes sometimes have 30 to 40 students. There's a lot of students. And I talk to a lot of my friends. I have friends and family that are teachers, and you talk to any teacher and there is a wide array of, I guess, grade levels within that one grade level. So if you're teaching, say, a 5th grade class, I promise you all 30 students are not at the same level, at the same skill set. And so that is, you might have like 5, 6, 7 grades right there that you're trying to teach to. So, but our method, so we have a 1 to 10 ratio. So we have one academic, we call them academic coaches. So one coach for 10 students, and we teach that way. So not only that, our motto is to build leaders, cultivate entrepreneurs, and empower the next generation. So it benefits the younger students learning from the older students and having them take the lead and teach them a thing or two. And it also benefits the older students being with younger students, because now they actually have an opportunity to be a leader and to teach. The more that you have to explain and teach another person, the more you understand the material yourself. So there's a story that I always like to share. So one time I was subbing for one of our middle school classes, and we were reading. It was a science lesson, and so we were reading, and the word was nomadic. So our students are trained, if they don't know what a word is, there's no shame in it. Like, raise your hand, ask, what is this word? So the student raised his hand, and he was like, the word was nomadic. And he was like, what does nomadic mean? And so instead of just jumping and answering that question, I turned to the class and I was like, does anybody want to give it a shot? And so a girl raised her hand who was a grade above him, and she's like, does that mean like a nomad? And I said, yes, that's exactly what it means. And so she's like, okay, so it's like a nomad. And so she defined what a nomad was. She's like, that's, something that moves from place to place. It's not in a fixed location. So I was like, yes, exactly. Brilliant. And then I asked this question. I was like, can anybody give me an example of something that is nomadic in your daily life right now? So I asked this question, not even having an answer for myself. This same girl raised her hand, and she's like, oh, like a food truck. A food truck is nomadic. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was brilliant. And I couldn't even came up with an example like that. And so I love it because it's like these kids are thinking outside the box. And what our role is as educators here, as coaches, as mentors, is to really just ask thought-provoking questions to our students and having them come up with answers that are outside the box. And so we might have had one lesson, there might have been something that we were reading, but we will stop and we'll ask them all the time, like, what do you guys think? And why? Why do you think this is? And why do you think this is? We don't want them to be trained to just read something and know and, prepare for a standardized test. That's what we're not big on. We don't give tests like, traditional schools do. We want them to think outside the box. And so that's just an example that I like to give to people of like what it looks like in our setup. So our classrooms are not individual desks facing the front where we have the coaches just teaching at the student. It's, yes, there's going to be some instruction that's going to be delivered, but for the most part, the students are the ones that are delivering, the instructions or reading, or, we'll assign, okay, you got article 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're the ones that are in charge of it. And however they want to do it, if they want somebody volunteer, if they want to assign, but they're the ones that are in charge of helping deliver the instruction themselves. So I love it. And the amount of engagement that this brings for our students is wild. There's another story. So one time we were teaching about, we're talking about the continental drift, basically the theory of continental drift. And so we're talking about how, hey, there was a supercontinent. The theory is, so we're kind of explaining that. And, I was explaining how if you look at Africa and, you look at like South America, and if you push it together, you can kind of see how there was this like supercontinent. So we're explaining it, we're learning this. And so we had a student that was like, because we're also talking about how there's certain like vegetation and plants and animals that were found in the west part of Africa that were the same as the east part of, South America. And how also that, one could infer that it might have fit. And so then we had, a kid raise his hand, and he's like, well, but, there was a lot of trading going on, and, ships going from one coast to the other coast. And so that's possibly how it could have happened. And, when I was actually had another coach that was shadowing, who was a trained teacher, and she immediately was like, and went to go cut him off. And so I kind of like put my hand up, and I was like, no, yeah, like, tell me more. And so, we are, as adults, a lot of times our educators so trained to cut our kids off and tell them like, nope, that's not the answer, or try again. We're so trained to say, oh yeah, no, that's not right. But I stopped and I was like, why do you think that is? Or what do you think? And I started to see it, like we start to see our students when it starts to click and their minds just expand, because for them, there are several different possibilities. And then we started to get into like the volcanic rock and what was found in the oceans and stuff. And so I love it because if you ask them enough questions and, well, why do you think that? And why do you think that? And how is that possible? All we're here to do is just to provoke thought. We just want them to really think outside the box. And sometimes there is a right answer. And sometimes we'll wait and have them, get to that answer. And if you ask enough questions, they will eventually figure that answer out themselves. And so another example, so I went to go to St. George when St. George opened up, and we went through, it was a social studies. And so we learned about Oceania, and we were talking about Australia and New Zealand in particular. And we're talking about voting. And so New Zealand, I believe it was, you have to register to vote out there, but Australia, they will fine you if you do not vote. It's like $20. They'll fine you. And so we started talking about that and what are the pros and cons and what do you guys think? And so I opened up that discussion. And so one of the students was like, well, I think that's a good thing. I think that they should fine them, and that because everybody should vote. And I was like, okay, I was like, I think everybody should vote, but do you think it's wise for them to penalize? And he was like, no, because he goes, this was his example. He goes, what if it's a close call, right? And there's, you're trying to vote for who's in charge of the country, and it comes down to like 100 people, but those 100 people don't vote. He's like, and then, maybe the person who was the better candidate, maybe they didn't win. And so I was like, okay. I was like, so I see where you're going there, but may I throw, be devil's advocate? I said, but what if those 100 people that it could have teeter-tottered either way, what if they didn't do their homework? What if those 100 people didn't research and didn't learn the platforms of both candidates? And what if those 100 people voted for the less qualified candidate, or the candidate that maybe wasn't better for the country? Then what? And then he was like, oh my gosh, you're right. But I was like, what if these people just voted because they didn't want to get fined? So they just went in there and did eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and just picked somebody, but picked the wrong candidate. And so I just asked that question, and he was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. And so then this is what we do. So it's just like, so how do you feel about that now? And he was like, man, you're so right. Like, it's not good to fine the constituents and to force them to vote, because what if they didn't do their homework and they're just trying to get out of paying $20? And so, you know, and there wasn't, for me, I was like, hey, I'm not telling you which way to think at all. But all I'm doing is I'm going to ask questions because I want you to think big picture. I want you to think that what could possibly go wrong if we were to vote like this, if we were penalized or given a fine for not voting. And so this is, these are just some examples of how conversations take place in the classroom. We don't want them to just memorize useless facts and just prepare for a test and stress out about it and cram, and just move on to the next and just say, okay, as soon as I'm done taking that test, it's like out of sight, out of mind. Like I told my kids, like you will never as an adult ever have to recall how long the Mississippi River is, like off the top of your head. Like I promise you that. Like, why are we spending so much time drilling in useless facts that for our kids to know when they should be taking the time to, and number one, they should be in the driver's seat of their education. And number two, we should be giving them voice and choice. And so if we want them to, like, we're very project-based learners. And so if we want them to learn something, we should allow them to be able to say, hey, I want to do this. And I also want to be able to present it a certain way. So my class, one time we were watching a science video. And so I was like, hey, at the end of this, take notes, because at the end of this, I want you guys to write me an essay. And then, of course, with their little negotiation skills, most kids hate presenting. Most people hate speaking in front of people. Our kids love it because they do it all the time. So they actually prefer presentations, which cracks me up. So they were like, no, actually, can we please present at the end of this? And so I was like, okay. So we started negotiating back and forth because at first I was like, no. And they're like, please. And so I was like, okay, so you have to do this many slides. This is the info on it. And so we came to an agreement of what that looks like. And so because they got to choose how they were presenting it, they were so excited. They were like, every break, every lunch, can I work on my slides? Can I work on my slides? And I was like, yeah, go ahead. Because they got to choose how they're going to present it. So guess what? They got up and presented it. And I gave them very little rubric, very little, this is how it has to look. And I feel like that also sometimes stifles our kids' creations when the rubric is so intense, when we're like, this is what it has to look like. It has to be along these lines. We're not giving them the chance to use their own definition and, paint on this blank canvas what it looks like. So anyway, so I was like, hey, the presentations, some of them were like master marketers and had the most amazing slideshows. Some of them had a ton of words on there, and because they were just so intrigued with their topic. And we had one little boy who wrapped his entire presentation, put rap music in the background. We were gassing him up. It was so awesome. But I've never learned so much about gorillas that I did that day. It was insane. And I think he had double the amount of slides. I'm pretty sure part of it was because he really just wanted to rap more, but there was a ton of facts. And I'm when I see things like this, I'm like, man, kids are sponges. And especially if you allow them to take it to the next level and choose what they want to learn and dive into, that's when it's fun for them. It's engaging. I was just talking to somebody today about the level of genius. So NASA did this study back in the day, and it was on the level of genius. And so they tested kindergartners and just every year all the way up to adulthood, 21. And would you know that the ones that had the highest level of genius were actually the kindergartners? And if that doesn't tell you, if that's not alarming, I don't know what is. So basically what I draw from that is we are actually taught to draw in the lines. We're taught to how to think a certain way. We're taught, how to, it's just, again, it's really just preparing for this test when we should be teaching them how to be critical thinkers and think outside the box. The other thing is just really teaching these kids, giving them an education that fits them. We at Elite, we believe that the education should fit the child and not the other way around. For example, it's really difficult for some people to learn certain methodology. And so my thing is, if a kid learns math a certain way and they process information a certain way, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If they get the right answer consistently every single time, it's okay for them to process information the way that they do. And so, I'll give you an example. When I started kind of getting into this, and some people are like, oh, well, so-and-so counts with their fingers. And I'm like, then let them count with their fingers. I don't know why it's so, and sometimes when I would start tutoring with kids and, I see them kind of try to like hide their fingers under the table, like they're counting with their fingers. And I'm like, babe, if you got to count with your fingers, I know adults that have to count with their fingers. They're attached to your body. And until they're comfortable, and this is what I tell like some coaches, some people that I get with, even parents, I'm like, let's not shame them out of what's comfortable for them. If they need a visual representation and they need to look at their fingers to count, they'll eventually get out of that. They'll be able to process a lot faster, but eventually they'll stop doing it. But let's not shame them for using their fingers. That's okay. It's okay. I'm like, I actually teach them tricks on how to use their fingers for multiplication. And I'm like, when they get to the point that they just know it off their head, then that's okay. But I feel like there is some shaming when it comes to education as well. You should be at this point, you should be doing this, you should be talking by this, all the way down to when kids are babies. Like, I'll never forget when I first, started having kids. Oh my gosh. So I was like, by the way, I don't know if you guys know, but I have 8 children. I birthed 6 of my own. I have 2 bonus daughters that still live in LA. So I've had many kids. And so when I would go to the pediatrician's office, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have to be on point and not a day after. They need their shots and all this stuff. I've evolved quite a bit, guys. But by my last kid, I remember going in and it was like, oh, they should be, saying this many words by this time. And I was like, trust me, like it was for Ephraim. And I was like, he's fine. And this pediatrician was so worried that he was going to be behind in speaking. So I remember I stopped and I was like, ma'am, how many kids do you have? And she was like, I have 1. I was like, okay. I was like, I have several. Like up to this point, I've birthed 5. And I was like, trust me, this is not my first rodeo. I know that you went to medical school for a very long time. I know that you read the books on where they should be at a certain time. But I'm telling you, like, he's fine. Sure enough, like 6 months later, this kid turns into a motor mouth. And like still to this day, like he will not stop talking. He even talks in his sleep. So like for me, I'm like, us as parents, when we start to understand that, like, literally everybody has their own time frame. Like they're going to learn at their pace, and that's okay. So that is why like we're against fitting kids in the box and making them feel like they have to fit in a certain mold. No, I don't want my kid to fit in a mold. I absolutely don't. And I'm like, it feels so liberating to finally be like, hey, we grew up and we were told, go to college, get the highest degree you can so you can make the most money. And that means you'll be successful. And as we know, that is absolutely not the case. I used to work at a college, you guys. I used to be a director and I helped run 2 college campuses. And now I'm like, just because you have your college degree does not equate to like success. And just because you're schooled does not mean that you're educated. And just because you're educated, if you're not schooled, doesn't mean you're not educated. Like I know a lot of people who are very educated because, they're self-educated, and that doesn't stop there. So what I'm realizing is that the thing that differentiates between people who are work high level, it's this and it's this right here. There's a lot of bosses, there's a lot of owners, business owners, whether or not you have your degree. Obviously, if you work in like law or medical, or you need a degree, then yeah, you have to go to college. But not everybody needs to go to college, and you don't need a degree to be successful. And I feel like everybody's kind of waking up to that point, especially because if you look at like corporations right now, over 50% of corporations are actually ditching degree requirements because they're realizing that they're getting people and hiring them for the degrees, and they're supremely lacking social skills. They're lacking communication skills, the ability to work as a team, to be self-motivated, to be able to even like self-regulate emotions. There's all these things in addition to, am I skilled on, whatever it is, that are proving to be more important than just like, did I check the box here? And I'm not knocking people with the degrees. And I'm not knocking people who, and I want everybody to know that. And this is not a jab at like teachers or administrators, public school. It's not a jab at that. It's really like the system itself. It's not a jab at people who get their degrees, because I think that's great, and I think that you can learn a lot from that. But I think it's really forcing everybody in the same box that they don't need to be / want to be. Another thing that I feel like is really so detrimental is giving grades, because how many of us growing up really had our self-worth tied into grades? Like, if you talk to people and they're like talking about a kid, and I don't know how many times, and I'm pretty sure I've done this too, where it's like, oh man, they're a great kid, 4.0 student, da 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 da. Like, talking about their grades is one of the first things that we do. And like, how sad is that, And on the flip side, if we talk about, oh yeah, this kid is like naughty and like straight F's, and again, one of the first things that we do when we want to talk about and just really drive home the fact, like, what type of kid this is tied into their grades. And so I used to do that too. I'm no different. I used to ride my oldest daughter, went to Bishop Gorman private school, and I was like, straight A's. If it would slip, if it'd be a B, I'd be like, why are you getting a B? And so, I've obviously evolved, and I'm starting to see that there are things that are far greater and far more important, and that can better illustrate how much they really know, rather than just focused and worried about the grades. So anyways, we've changed, and there's a lot of reasons why we do what we do, and we've designed our classes and our methods based on that, because we're starting to see that there's other things that are more important that are going to help them as an adult, well, even as a child, because again, I don't really care if my kid can tell you off the top of their head, like, how long the Mississippi River is, or name all the highways, or what was built first. Like, you can pull all that stuff up on your phone in like a matter of seconds. But the things that you can't pull up on your phone is like the skill sets that we're teaching them, like how to interact with adults, how to be articulate, how to be confident, how to be a good person. That's why character building is so important for us. We focus on building the whole person, and not just the student, not just the athlete, and all within a matter of 3 hours. So the way that we're designed is microschooling. So a lot of people are like, I don't even know what microschooling is. I didn't either until a couple of years ago, and now we're doing it. But it's really just a much smaller ratio. So we teach at a 1-to-10 ratio, and we work, we're more like concept mastery. We want to know that they understand the material so well they can stand up and teach it. And that's basically what it is. So we're here for the life skills. We're here for project-based learning. We're here for the depth. Like, our students are learning about real estate. Our 12-year-olds are walking around with their own stocks. They're starting their own business with real clients. They're knocking on doors. They're making cold calls. We're talking about 10, 11, 12-year-olds. We just had Shark Tank last Friday, and 7 of our students stood in front of 4 big-time business owners out here in Las Vegas. We had some of our Utah kids come down, and they pitched their ideas, their business ideas, and they're like, this is my business, these are my clients, this is how much I made. And they just fired at them like just a bunch of questions, and our students did so well. In that, I'll just tell you, some of our kids, we have a kid, one of our baseball players, his name's Caleb, and he started his own line of energy drinks, and all natural. And so there happened to be owners of a beverage company there, and they pulled him aside. They're going to sponsor him, and they're going to bring him under their umbrella, and so he can use their licensure and their permits, and they're going to come up with the formulas, figure out the shelf. Like, this kid's 13 years old, and he's about to have his own line of like beverage. Can you believe that? 13 years old. We have another kid, 10 years old, and his business called Tropical Treats, and one of the items was bread that his grandfather, made. And so he brought samples. There was a restaurant owner there, 2 other restaurant owners in the crowd, and they all tried it, and they got his information, and they want to sell his bread. They're like, how can you make it? We want to buy this in bulk. They want to put it on their menu and like make French toast with it. This kid's 10 years old. So they're like, we want to do business. Like, let's get together. We have another kid who is doing his own editing job. This kid's in 7th grade, and he got like a few clients. So not only did he get double the amount that he asked for, but he got some clients in there and he had his prices and they're like, no, you're going to quadruple it and you're going to charge all of us that, and that this is what you're going to do. So now one of his mentor is actually a business coach. And so she's going to take him under his wing and she's going to teach him how to scale his business. This kid is in 7th grade and he just started his own editing company. And he's getting, I mean, people pay tens of thousands of dollars for these business coaches, and she's a business coach and she's like, I got you, I'm going to mentor you. It's funny, one of her videos, it's on our thing, but she's like, you didn't even ask for mentorship, but you're going to get it anyways. And I love it because it's like, when we tell people what we're doing, there's so many people out there that want to mentor our kids that just want to jump in and they're like, yes, like this is it. Like this is absolutely what education needs to look like. And I love it because I've been meeting a lot of people lately in the school system, in the private sector, that sees us and is like, man, this is a great thing. And I love that we're all kind of like coming together and saying like, hey, we're all educators and we all want to do right by this up and coming generation. And how can we partner together to make this a great thing? So if you are considering homeschooling, if it's been a thought in your mind and you have anything that's in you that's just like, I want to homeschool, but I got to go work full time, or I want to homeschool, but I don't want to do it. I want to send them somewhere, pick them up. If you have been considering homeschooling, but whatever the case may be, I promise you, we can help you in any capacity. So the other thing about homeschooling is a lot of parents get really worried about it because they're like, it seems so permanent. And what if I don't like it? You have the right as a parent to decide if you want to homeschool them. And if it doesn't work and you want to put them right back in, you can absolutely do that. So just know that you're going to have people telling you that you can't, or your school might tell you, no, you can't, or there's a wait list. We've heard like every excuse in the book. No, that's not true. You have the right as a parent. And if you want to sign up for a free consultation with us to ask us anything and everything, you don't even have to sign up with us. We just really want to help educate families so that they know their options, whether you're doing it yourself or sending them to a co-op, or there's a hybrid situation in some states, and there's funding in some states. Some states have funding to where you can send them to centers like ours, and many of these parents are paying $0 out of pocket. So, by the way, we love School's Choice. It's an opportunity for parents to choose programs like ours to send their kids where they want to build leaders, cultivate entrepreneurs, and empower the next generation, because that is what we're here to do. So anyways, I know this was a lot. If you guys end up watching this at a later time and you have any questions, drop it in the comments so we can just answer right back there in front of everybody, or you can shoot us a DM. And also, if you are interested in meeting with one of our amazing admission reps, or even talking to myself, because sometimes I pop in there as well, hop in our DMs. And or the link in the bio, there's an application link. Go ahead and click that, fill that out, free. It's a free conversation to have with us, you guys. And also, if you're like, man, I really love this and I want to get behind and I want to start my own center, well, we are actually onboarding new owners as well. So you don't need to know about business. You don't need to be in education or know anything about education. You don't need to know about homeschool. If you want to own your own center and join the elite family and help move this mission forward, we can also do that. There's an app. There's also a link in the bio for the Owners Club. Click that, fill it out. Those owners, actually, you get my link. So I will, I'm the one that actually takes those interviews with the owners. So anyways, I love you guys and I'm here for you guys. If you have any questions, thanks for tuning in tonight, and slide up in our DMs, fam.